Welcome to another episode of Successfully Unsuccessful. I'm your host, Josh Dietrich. Today, physically here in the house is Mr. Jade Rowe. Jade, how are you, sir?
I'm great, Josh. Blessed to be here.
Dude, I love it. I love the fact that you and I go back a number of years.
Yeah.
And what are you, a young 26-year-old?
28.
28?
Oh, it's crazy.
I love it.
I'm up on 30.
I love it. Well, as I was thinking and always do about who I would love to have on the show to share their successfully unsuccessful story, I think of guys that have a strong faith who, even in my plus 12 years on you, admire guys who are this far along in their walk with Christ, their boldness, but also the fact that you get up in the morning and have this drive. And so why don't you just quickly tell us what it is you do, how long you've been doing it, and anything about your family and where you live.
Yeah. So thanks for that intro, Josh.
Yeah,
I'm Jade, 28 years old. I grew up in Maple Grove. Parents were separated, never married. Separated. My dad grew up in Kimball, Minnesota, not too far from kind of St. Michael. So the 94 drive was
familiar
all the time. Went to Maple Grove High School, and then went over to St. Thomas and St. Paul. Got a economics and operations management degree, and then I worked at corporate for a year and a half. Knew that I didn't want to be in corporate forever. My grandpa and grandma came over from England, actually, so they're first generation immigrants. They came over in 1966, and he was an engineer and then started buying rental property. So growing up, I grew up in the real estate industry, mowing lawns, doing maintenance, writing CRPs, certificate of rent paids, collecting rent, helping manage them. So I always was in real estate, but didn't really have an interest in it until kind of I got out of college and started learning about real estate and having this drive for it, kind of to just be successful in something of my own, to do something on my own, not do something that was ordinary, and went through a lot of just sanctification during that kind of time of life, which was about 2018, 2019. Got water baptized, grew up a Lutheran, grew up a believer, but really made my faith my own in 2018, which was awesome. And then during that process, the Lord just kind of revealed to me, hey, why don't we take this step of faith? You don't know where you're going to go yet. And I'm such a overanalyzer at times, so I overanalyzed the heck out of that time period of where I wanted to go. Ended up getting my real estate license and joining a property management company and doing leasing and property management for about a year. And then kind of just learning, hey, this isn't where I really want to be. I don't feel really solid here. And then talked to a bunch of people, got kind of a couple different offers. And then it was funny, I called a friend of mine who I was kind of in a small group with him, and I knew he was a real estate agent, but he's not from Minnesota. So I called him just to say, hey, I got this offer to go out in Tennessee. And John Harrison, actually, who I talked to him about, and he was encouraged me to go, which was awesome. And I was leaning towards that, but I wanted to talk to my friend and kind of mentor at the time, just to be hey, what's it look like to move away from family? Because my whole world was in Minnesota. And I told him, I said, I have this job offer in Tennessee, or I have this kind of offer from this other real estate agent to join his team.
Right.
And as soon as I mentioned this other agent from his team, he's like, well, wait a second. I didn't know you were ever interested actually in doing buy or sell. And I'm like, I kind of am. I don't really know yet. Maybe we should just talk about it. So then he said, well, come on. If you have an offer from that before you go down the Tennessee route, why don't you come talk to me and I'll explain kind of the team. So, and that was Taylor Doolittle.
Gotcha.
And he, called me up and we had lunch and talked about just the team and why he does what he does, where it could go, why he thinks I could be a good fit. And it was the perfect God moment, because I feel all of the other opportunities, I just had this something in my gut where it just didn't feel right.
Yeah.
And I even remember talking to somebody, I was in this commercial brokerage office, and I signed the papers. And then I signed them to say I'll agree, and then there was just this heat of don't do it. And I took the papers and shoved them in my backpack, and I was yeah, I'll take these home, I'll review them, and I'll get back to you. And they're like, okay. They didn't know that I signed them and actually put them in my backpack, because I just didn't feel right.
That was at the other place.
That was a different place. Yeah, because I had 3 or 4 offers out there, and one of them was a commercial.
And you were going to sign on a different one.
I was going to sign on different ones, but all of these ones, just none of them felt right. And then when Taylor presented this opportunity to me to join the real estate team I'm on right now, it was just a total there was nothing. God was finally just pushing me just go run 100 miles an hour. So I joined them in December of 2019, I think, is when I joined.
Oh yeah, so that is coming up 5 years.
So I've been doing that now for 5 years, and it's been awesome. So I'm a real estate agent, do primary residential, but kind of doing a little bit of commercial stuff now, which is fun to kind of do a little bit of both. And it's gotten me to the point where I always wanted to be, which was buying a couple of my own rentals. And now I'm kind of in this place of like, okay, like just got married in November, which has been awesome, 6 months of marriage, and figuring out where I want to go next, right?
Yeah.
I feel like I have a pretty decent, real estate business, pretty successful with that. But I'm always wanting to grow and just do different things as well. So where do I want to go to? I want to just keep fire on this, which I will, but then there's obviously a lot of other opportunities out there. And throughout this all, just trying to be, grow as a disciplined just husband now, and learning about how to be a better husband. Starting to talk about children, so I want to be a dad eventually, and how to just be the best dad that I can be. And I do feel grateful with the experiences that I've had with my mom and my dad, because I kind of grew up with two different parenting styles almost, and saw kind of two different ends of the spectrum. So now trying to figure out like how do I find that happy medium between both of them, because I love them both and they both gave me awesome skills and experiences, but they both had negatives too. So how do I find that kind of happy medium?
Dude, so cool. Well, thanks for sharing. I think it's important to just digest. I think everyone goes through this where you're like, I'll try this, I'll try that. I think I want this, I think I want that. Like, I moved to Minnesota for something that I was excited about, video broadcasting. Oh, what do you know? 20 years later, I finally doing something with it. But how did you? I mean, you got to the point of saying like, hey, I don't want corporate, and I don't want this, rental property management thing. What was the driver? And then when real estate kind of popped in. Because I think sometimes when we have so many options. When the world is our oyster, it's like, where do you begin, right? And so for you, what was your process of like determining, hey, real estate is it? Because you got to earn a living, right? You want to love what you do, you want to be good at it, but besides that,
it's a great question. I think at the time, this was like 2017, 2018. I was living in an apartment with two of my college friends, and wanting to buy a duplex. Like that was where it came from, me wanting to get out of my apartment and buy a duplex. My mom had kind of planted the seed a little bit, like, hey, like you should save some money and buy a duplex. That's kind of what she did to kind of get started too. And so that was where it first came from. I was like, I want to buy a duplex, right? Well, then going through that and learning about managing rental property, how to buy them, how to analyze that. I did all that on my own.
And that was prior to having your license?
That was prior to having my license. This is when I'm still in corporate, right? Trying to figure out like, hey, when I move out of this apartment, I want to buy a rental and, rent to some buddies and stuff.
Right.
And that was where the itch kind of got me. Like I dove all the way into that, signed up for some kind of courses and stuff like that, and just kind of fell in love with it, to be honest with you. Fell in love with commercial apartments, fell in love with duplexes, fell in love with just real estate in general, like kind of the rental game. And then at that point too, I was working, and I was in this kind of like course with this kind of mentor that was kind of teaching me just real estate, right? And he brought up a really good point that I was reading like Rich Dad Poor Dad, and I was reading all the developmental books at that time too, right? And I remember just thinking to myself like, hey, like I was like 22 probably at this point. I had a little bit of student debt and a car payment and my rent, right? So I didn't have much overhead, and for whatever reason, probably was a God moment that I didn't even really think about back then, was like, this is your time to learn and not necessarily earn, and this is your time to take the risk, right? It's easier to take the risk when I don't have mortgages and 100%. Kids and a wife. Like I can work 12 hours a day and not care about it, and just do whatever I need to do. If I need to scrub toilets, I'll scrub toilets to make rent, right? So I remember quitting my job, give my 2 weeks, didn't even have exactly what I was going to do, but I was like, I'm pretty sure I'm going to go work at this rent, get my license, do this, right? So I did that. I sold my car so that I bought like a $5,000 junky, like all cash car.
You still drive it, don't you?
I don't. I don't. I did get a new car a couple of years ago, but I did drive it throughout that in kind of 3 or 4 years of building my business. And then I got a part-time, like I was really into small group like fitness at that time. So I actually got a small group fitness coaching job, and I did that like I think it was 2 or 3 times a week, and that paid for my rent. And then I had like $200 and some student debt payment, which was nice. So I really had low overhead. Did that for like 6 months, then moved back home and lived at home with my parents for about another year until I bought my first property. But that was kind of what it was. It was like me wanting to buy a rental property. Like me just, I was relatively content with like, hey, I'm making a decent salary, like I got this kind of safety net, but I wanted to buy a duplex.
Right.
And that was what kind of triggered me, like, oh, this is pretty cool. And then listening to the podcast, and then figuring out like, okay, like, and then just kind of getting into like self-development at that point too, like reading like the Rich Dad Poor Dad and those types of books, grew me in the sense of, grew my mind of like what's possible. And me being like, oh, like there's a lot more out here.
Yeah.
And like, this is the time to do it. Like I do have very little overhead.
Did you have confidence at that time in your life? Because I think when someone says, hey, going into real estate to actually be good, points you to the direction like, wow, it seems like there's a lot here to learn how to do it and to get the test and the schooling, and then then it moves you into like, well, I need to be a better person, I need to be able to communicate better, I need better principles, and so you go down this personal development path. But it sounds like a lot of that was led by this idea that you want to go into real estate. But when you were at corporate, rewinding a little bit, do you remember anything specifically that stood out when you're like, just this is not where I want to be, or why, in terms of the job you were doing or the company or the culture?
Yeah, I think a couple things. I think the job in itself wasn't bad. I think I was naturally, and I think this maybe came out during my college years of like me just being a high performer. Like I wanted to get better. I could kind of go into a meeting and just lead it right from the start and be able to communicate. And I didn't feel like that was, it was appreciated, but it was like, hey, like I've been here half the time as this senior analyst, and I'm kind of outperforming them, but they're the next step for the next job, or they're making more money than me. Like I'm not getting really rewarded for this.
Yeah.
And also just the fact that like I did see my manager. She was great. My second manager was great. My first manager, my second manager was great. And she and her husband were both in corporate. And I just saw the struggle they had with 2 kids, like how they didn't have any flexibility. Like, they had to be managing their corporate jobs, daycare, going to their kids' games. Like it was tough, like not having any flexibility.
Wow.
And I saw that. And also just the fact that, like, again, I was a high performer. I got my job done. Always. I was always ahead of it. But if I left for an hour and a half lunch, it was like, well, where are you going? You can come. When are you coming back? It's like, we don't. Why you got to be like that? Like, I'm gonna get my stuff done. If I want to go have lunch with Josh for an hour and a half for a friend, or
like, what's the big deal?
What's the big deal?
Right.
Why do I need to be in the office for 8 hours? Right. So, and I even got like crap because I started a golf league with my grandpa. When I've been doing that, it's been an awesome blessing in my life to do a golf league with my 80-year-old grandpa.
So cool.
But I had to leave at 3 on Tuesdays. One day a week I had to leave early.
Someone had a problem with that.
So much, you're leaving at 3. Why? I got way more done in the 6 hours I was here than the other guy who was a senior analyst who was here for 10 hours.
Yeah. So how much of that, though, in your mind, and that's really good. You brought up a couple points. Basically, the being stuck, knowing that there's a path, and that path is slow. That path is motivating for maybe the wrong behaviors, and it's limiting in terms of like flexibility in your time. It's almost like there's lack of control of earning potential, and lack of control with time. Do you recall, like, specifically you mentioned the one couple, but importance of wanting to have autonomy being a really big factor of you, like saying, hey, I gotta get out of here, like wanting to be able to, because choosing real estate gives you that. Yep. Clearly, but and that probably played into it.
Yeah, no, it definitely did. I mean, there's a couple things I thought about. One is like my mom, my stepdad, both my stepmom and my dad, they have more corporate jobs within the office, right? My stepdad's a teacher, and my mom was in real estate. So I like growing up. My mom was awesome. Like if we were sick, she would stay home.
Whatever
she could bring me to school. She could just had more flexibility, right? Now that came with her working on the weekends sometimes. That came with her
missing some things,
but that flexibility of that was amazing, right?
Yeah.
And I wasn't self-aware at that time to like understand that, but then once I got older and realized, like, holy smokes, that was cool to have that,
right?
And then I also thought, like, again, being my age, it was like these jobs, these analyst jobs, these corporate jobs are always gonna be around. They're always, if I burn and I go around, at least I tried, I can always get this job. I can always go to the Best Buy, Targets, United Health Groups, wherever, and get a corporate job.
That's a good point, and I think that's what happens over time, right? If we get comfortable in that, and that's okay. We're all called to a level of degree that we're given. Like in the parable of the talents, is for much is given, much is expected. It really is the principle there. And if you're feeling called to make a bigger impact, right, it's like a natural progression to want to figure out what that looks like. So now, was financial reward, did it outweigh time
I think
management?
financial reward was a huge deal at that time. I just think I think my understanding of financial reward was maybe skewed in a sense of like me thinking I needed more actually than what I actually did. Because I remember like, I just feel like growing up in college stuff, like once you make $100,000, like holy smokes, you made it, right? And then like my second year in real estate, I made like 200,000+, and I was like, holy smokes, like my skew of like I made an insane amount was like, okay, like what I thought I needed, because 100,000 was good, but like I had these big goals, I'll make $1 million. It's like, holy smokes, I don't actually, like $200,000 was an insane amount of money for me at 26, whatever. It was like, holy smokes. So that was, so it was there, but I think it was skewed in the sense of like I didn't really realize what that opened, like the doors that opened up, and how much did I actually need. And that's, I know we've talked about it prior to this, but like that's the contentment that I'm trying to figure out now, is like what is enough, right?
Yeah,
like,
that's it.
You know, in my current role, in my current business, I make more income than both sets of my parents probably combined. And they grew up with a pretty happy life.
Life was fine, right?
You know, how do I manage this now?
Where is it really at?
Yeah.
And so then you kind of switch to the other side of the teeter-totter, right? Because in the very beginning, it's lopsided. We have more time than money, so we work hard to earn money. And then we earn more money, we realize it actually doesn't buy any happiness at all. It just makes our decisions and choices maybe a little easier, but you still have time. And if you're working in industry that requires the next deal, right, you have to keep working. So in your mindset now, has that shift started where you're like, my time is important now? How do I have
very important?
So where's your head at now? And again, thinking about those that are in corporate, because I think the reality is we're all over the board in this, and I think for all of us, it's like, what is my purpose? You know, what do I love to do? What am I great at? I have a family. I don't have time to go do this other thing, a side thing, but I know I can earn more, but I don't really want to job hunt. Like all of the time, we want our time back. We want more money. And but at a certain point, you're like, okay, I've tasted this, but now I want time. And so how does that change in your thinking about real estate and or your future?
No, it's a great question. I think, like you said, at first, it's like I wasn't married, I was single, and I was able to work every weekend doing open houses. It's what it is. I'll do showings at 7 o'clock at night. I don't care, I'll take it. Now it's like, okay, now I'm married, and we're gonna start eventually have kids. Like, I'm not doing a showing at 7 o'clock at night. Like, no, I'm not. Like,
some guardrails there.
There's definitely guardrails. I'm not doing open houses on the weekend. I'll do showings from a block of time on the weekends. And I'll be the first to say, like, even as a successful real estate agent, I've had thoughts of like, man, like, it is just too much. It's too much, just like this up and down. Like, why don't I just go get $150,000 job that's just stable, right? I have had those thoughts because of just the always having to hunt. And I think where I'm at now is trying to. I love my business is at a point where like I feel good about it. Where it's going to continue, and I don't want it to end per se, but like looking at like other business opportunities. Something I think. What I've learned is like, okay, I understand business now. I think that's what came from being a real estate agent, was like, real estate agent isn't like owning it's owning a business, but it's different, right? But it's still like you understand business. I managed I managed marketing, I managed lead flow, I managed all of that. I managed my own finances. How much do I invest back in the business? All of that, right? And now trying to figure out something that maybe I could start by that has a little bit more like recurring revenue, or just something that's maybe a little bit not as high ticket, and there's not as much competition. Because that's the hard thing about real estate, is I can be the best agent, but if Josh's aunt is a somewhat good agent, you're probably going to go with your aunt, and that's not a bad thing. But it's like, how do I? There's not these competitive advantages that I think other businesses potentially have. It's so relationship based, which I'm good at building relationships, but some relationships just trump it, and there's millions of agents out there. So how do you differentiate yourself? Can be a challenging thing. So trying to look for something that is more reoccurring, and then also I think not as big of like I can actually have a competitive advantage, and that, you know, if I can convince someone to buy or sell a house with me, like one of their biggest assets, you know, I can probably get someone, if I started a window cleaning business, I can probably convince someone to pay me for a $500 window cleaning business, something like that. So those are kind of the thoughts that are running through my mind. I also have a brother who's starting college probably next year. We're trying to figure out. I know he was so set on becoming an engineer, and I think seeing me being in business and my mom like he's not wanting to be an engineer. He knows he's not going to be an engineer. So maybe, we've talked about starting a small business or something like that, just to kind of show him what business looks like and what lead generation looks like and all that kind of stuff.
I think it's a newer movement. For some reason, it just seems like there's a change in culture around this idea of stability versus flexibility and earning potential. Like, and again, the season of life, it's not very affording when you have a mortgage and several kids to go out and try this venture.
Yeah,
and so starting it earlier, right? You kind of can get that head start and get those quirks out of your system. But when you're on this other side now, going, okay, I know what it takes. I have a new question that's kind of like ingrained in purpose, right? So like at the end of the day, are you a realtor that happens to be a Christian, right? Or are you a man of faith or a Christian that happens to provide for his family by being a realtor?
The second one.
And so if that's the case, then we can't necessarily say it's all about the money or all about the time, right? It's our mission field. So how does that play in? Because I'm really curious, like to move transactions means you're building relationships either with new people or enhancing existing ones. God has you right here for a reason and a purpose. And there's also the trade-off of you move down another path, whether you move your volume in half, that's half the amount of people that get the Jade impact, right? How do you feel like the Lord's leading you in that? Because I think that's a key piece, right? And part of who we are and our personal mission is impacting people for the kingdom.
Yeah, and I think that's the blessing of me being an agent now for the last 5 years is the relationships that I built, or like the reconnecting with people that I would have never connected with ever again, like people from high school or college or family members or whatever, that like I've built better relationships now because of that. And I think that there's there's an outwardly, I think that's part of the reason why they come to me, because I think as an agent there's this, like, some people, as a realtor, like there's so many, like, people think of this kind of like a slicked back person, like I don't know if I can trust them, or like I'm very outwardly about my faith on social media, about me being a Christian, about me being a believer, right? People asking me about my Bible studies, people ask me about church, and me now feeling like I'm in a place to start inviting some of those people too.
That's neat.
That have been past clients or friends to like a Bible study that I start. It is super awesome, and I think that there's just like me showing up in that, like, I'm gonna help you buy a house, but me just showing up in that relationship as I have the strength of the Lord with me is a freeing feeling for me, and I think people see that in myself, and I think even in our whole team that I'm a part of.
No, and I've seen some of that. Obviously, I know some of the guys in your team too, and I very much can witness that. And what's interesting though is, that boldness you're talking about, living out your faith and being the genuine person you are. Like, was that there in the beginning? And obviously you're, going back to 2018, you talked about being baptized, but walk me through really high level your faith journey. And so that evolution where your impact and people in real estate, really you started wearing your faith in a place that would show up, whether or not, it was just kind of coming out of you as a natural part of who you are. Walk us through your journey where that season maybe started to happen in the sanctification process for you.
Yeah, I think it wasn't there. It wasn't as strong in the beginning, like flowing out. But then as I grew as a person, as I grew stronger in my faith, it shaped me. And I think I went through stages of just like my relationship with Christ and Him telling me who I truly am and me learning who I am.
Yeah.
Because I think that at first I was trying to be someone that maybe I truly wasn't, and I'm almost getting away from someone that I thought I didn't want to be. And I think the sanctification process probably came maybe 2 years ago, like starting to realize, like, it was actually probably when I met my wife, when I met my now wife and we started dating, like me feeling like, oh, like this is kind of who I am, and I can be this person and this person. Like I can be, what I mean by that is, like, I thought that I had to put myself in this box as a Christian almost, and now I'm like, oh wait, like no, I can be this person that I actually truly am, and wear my heart, my faith on my sleeve, and be bold about my faith, but be truly who I am, and do things that I truly enjoy, and be around people that I do enjoy being around, and not feeling like and not even just thinking of like people that like were old college friends that, like I can still be their really good friend and be supportive. And I'm a huge listener. I enjoy listening to people. I know that's a skill of mine. Like I enjoy leading a Bible study, not because I'm there to be like teach you guys something crazy,
right.
but like I just want to like hear you out. And that's a big story about my faith, is just I feel like Jesus is just that person that like, yes, I share pretty much everything with my wife, but like she doesn't want to hear all of the stuff that's just going on in my crazy mind. And Jesus is just that person for me. Like I can just like everything, all my struggles, all my fears, all of that. And I just love that. And I love that relationship with him. And I want other people to have that. So that's why I really enjoy listening and just, hey man, like I'm not here to judge you. I've probably done all of the things that you think I'm going to judge you for. I've done them. I've been there. So I want to hear it. Like, tell me. Because that's what Jesus wants.
The vulnerability is truly strength, right? And when we get on our knees and be willing to show our scars, you know, and relate to other people in the mess, it completely eradicates, you know, the sense of pride, you know, and I think ultimately pride isn't love, and if it's not of love, it's not of God, right? And it's of self. And when we truly transform, we die to self. And so it's interesting because, you know, you mentioned growing up in the faith in a Lutheran church, and you know, and I think part of our conversation earlier is, I think there's just so many people that have a faith background that, no pun intended, Jade did. Jade.
Yep.
Their perception of faith and Christianity based on religion.
Yes.
Not the Holy Spirit living inside us, and Jesus is the way to that. But so when you look back, and you know, it was probably more of a religion at some point.
Oh, yeah.
And then
check the box for sure.
Check the box, right? Show up to church, participate, maybe give, serve. But when you surrender and decide that you're all in, and you give it to him, it's almost like this contradiction in our minds. It's almost like a walking, you know, impossible thing to get over, that when our biggest struggles are the things we're supposed to lean into, because those are the areas of our life that he wants to work through us, right? And so it's so countercultural to do that. It's like, as men, we hide behind some of those.
It's countercultural men to be vulnerable too.
Bingo. So what do you think, what did Jesus do in this change, going from just, you know, I know about this religion thing, to I'm going to get baptized and profess my faith as a believer, to, you know, getting to the point where you're living more on purpose and opportunities for you to be that in someone's life? How did Jesus change you, and where in your life did you fall and realize you had to 100% surrender for it to come back into the place where you're like, you know what, why do I think I can keep doing this on my own? Because I feel like not everyone has that story necessarily, but a lot of people do, and usually when they hit some point in their life, they go, that's the one that changed, that just really clicked for me.
Yeah, it's a good question. I think looking back, it starts with me growing up in the church, me obviously doing the check boxes. In college, it's funny because in college, I did all of the college things that you think about. I got drunk, I went to parties, but what was funny is I said the Lord's Prayer pretty much every night. Because I grew up, my grandma and grandpa said to me every single night, and I lived with them for a portion of my life, and that's what they did every single night. Our Father who art in heaven, every single night. So like, even in college, like, I'd be going to sleep drunk, and I would say the prayer. So like, Jesus was with me, right? And I think what happened was during that college experience, I thought I saw other Christian groups or Christian people, what this is gonna maybe sound bad, but which is what I felt like was super judgmental towards me, like being like, oh, you're in this, doing these things which were sinful, right? But being extremely judgmental and not wanting to have a conversation with me about it. So then I kind of pushed it away, right? But still was there, but pushed it away of me making it serious.
That's it. We want to run from it rather than embrace it.
Correct, because I was feeling judged. It was really 100%.
And it might have been even some of that as guilt.
Yep, judge and guilt, both of it. And then getting out of college, I was trained for a marathon, and my Twin Cities marathon, with a couple of my dad's friends, stepdad's friends. And I saw something, I had some conversations with them, and I saw this, like, hey, like, these guys are all pretty successful in their different jobs, teachers, one guy's a CPA, different things. They all are kind of seem like they're having a good time. They all have awesome families. They all have strong faiths, and they all get together and have a drink, hang out, but keep it cordial and have just kind of like what I want. Like, that seems awesome.
Yeah.
Like, you guys are great friends. Like, you're training for this marathon together. You're doing life together. You all have strong faith. You talk about your faith. You make it about Jesus. You glorify him.
You're like, who are these people?
This is cool. And that's then when the Lord put in my heart, like, hey, like, I started praying about me wanting to be in a Bible study and that kind of stuff, right? And then I got presented with a Bible study, men's Bible study, joined that men's Bible study. That was a huge learning process of me just, okay, now how do I...
That was brand new for you?
Brand new as like a men's Bible study, brand new, yeah.
Yeah, because like you're showing up as a dude.
Showing up as a dude and like... And me, it was exactly what I wanted it to be. It was like a bunch of dudes that all were dudes, but all loved Jesus and got together and just prayed and talked about the Bible and did it.
And they were dudes that were what in your
my same age of life, and they were, you know, trying to be good guys, right? Trying to like build their careers in different avenues and just whatever. And that was like one of the first times that I remember praying out loud, like, was there, besides like, you know,
that was probably scary the first time.
Super scary, yeah.
My wife the first time.
It was actually funny. Shay Hurley, who he was one of the guys that first prayed out loud with Shay, in like our little small group at this Bible study.
That's cool, man.
Yeah. So did that, and then that was obviously then sanctifying me, and then I was getting into the Word and going to church, and then wanted to get baptized. So, and then it was just me being like, oh, like I can. And that was me then going all the way from my sin, all the way from the stuff that I did in college, right? Going through porn Bible studies, going through that kind of stuff, going the complete opposite direction, right? And now I feel like in the last couple of years, me trying to not necessarily, not going back to my sin, absolutely not, but not being that judgmental person that I thought that I was scared to talk to, right? So how do I now approach that kind of middle space where, like, okay, you're where I was in college. You're drinking, you're doing these things, right? I want to show up to where you're at because I know I've been there and I know kind of where you're at and what you're going through. Here, I'm not judging you, right? I've been there. Jesus isn't judging you. Jesus just wants a relationship with you.
Yeah, dude.
He wants you to turn away from this sin that you're in, but he wants a relationship with you. So how do we do that? And that's kind of where I feel like I'm at now. But it's me going to the extreme opposite, right? Me being way over one side and then going all the way to the other side, and now being me trying to figure out, like, my calling, I truly feel like, is now coming to this place of, like, I don't want to judge you. I want to hear where you're at. I've done what you've done. How do I show you that Jesus is the guy you want to love?
Honestly, though, right? That's, I think, one of the largest barriers that the label of Christian. Sometimes it's like, I don't even want to wear the label because I want people to perceive me as the way that I act and treat them, right? And I want them to understand something about this guy is different. And not because I put a label on it and that gives them a chance. It's almost like, take it all away, just let me be me and let me show you the Jesus way that I know. And that's the biggest hope, right? For someone to go, that Jade dude, right? There's something different about him. You know, he's successful. He's fun to be around. Yeah, he doesn't swear. I mean, he still has a beer or two. Mm-hmm. You know, the stuff you're talking about. And I think a lot of this comes back to accessibility to a culture of community, of like-mindedness. Mm-hmm. And if we look back, and this is my story too, like, I grew up in a small town and being forced to go to youth group with a bunch of, I don't even know what to call or say, but it's mostly like, I don't really relate. I don't, you know, and maybe I had some of my own judgments and whatnot, but the reality is when we start having community and that vulnerability shows up, right, we can really start to go, oh, my identity is deeply rooted in Christ. I don't have to hide because this guy's been through this and this struggle, you know. And so personally, you know, my struggle was anger and selfishness comes from, you know, wanting to not be interrupted, wanting my kids to absolutely listen to what I'm saying, wanting my wife to understand my viewpoint and maybe even subscribe to it, could actually push my buttons greater than anyone else in the world. And so what I realized, even the way this professing believer, me, you know, my wife wasn't getting the best of me.
No. Yeah.
In the sharpest of tongues and whatever swear word or whatever, you know, anger expression of loud vocals, you know, punching or kicking something, you know, a physical door. And so I'm curious for you, because sin manifests its way differently, and a lot of times it's just dying to self, and you can eradicate sin and letting Christ take over. But for you, what was that? And you mentioned the porn study, you mentioned going to parties and things, but I think ultimately we all struggle with different things. For you, where was the rubber that meets the road for you? Like, you know what? This is something I was really working with, but I have to give this to God. And in my area of my life that I don't want to, and sometimes even finances, like, oh gosh, I don't want to start giving, like, So how is the Lord leading you now, and even at a point in where there was a major breakthrough that you can recall?
Yeah, that's a good question. There's a lot. I mean, there's obviously, like, you said, like, the finance part, like, that was obviously me being so driven in the beginning, and reading scripture, me just being like, that was the reason why I joined CBMC back in the day. Like, how do I be driven and kind of like want to make money so that I can provide for my family and be a Christian? Like,
but not all the love of money.
But all the scripture tells me, like, the love of money is the root of all evil, right? So
it's not the money.
It's not. Yeah. So just that was a big part of it. It was just trying to, how do I navigate that? Yep. How do I be around guys that are doing it, and what do they have to say about it?
What's their viewpoint? Back to sharpening again, right?
And then I think the second part was, definitely, like, I think the being self-aware and control of what's your sin, and or what situations are you going to probably sin in, right? So that is, like, for me, like, not putting myself into positions where I'm going to be tempted a lot more, like whether it is big parties that people want to drink at, right? Or is it going to be me being alone and stressed out, where that could lead me to going down the porn, right? And giving up that, or like me now being like, okay, yep, now that I'm with Christ, like, I'm waiting to have sex before marriage. Like, that's going to be a big thing for me, right? And I think it's kind of funny because I look back and it's like the sin that I did in the past I feel like has created good experiences, actually, where I can now boldly talk about why it's so much better to follow Jesus, in a sense of, like, trust me when I say, like, okay, a college kid, like my brother is awesome. I'm trying to, like, talk to him about things and stuff. It's like, you're gonna get tempted to have sex in college. I did it. Here's why it's so much better, Cameron, to not do it. I've done both, and it's just funny thinking about some of those things where, like, the sin that I was in, the sin that I did do, led me to Jesus, led me to forgive, but creates now just awesome opportunities for me to be, like,
100%,
like, telling you, like, I've been there, I've done that, and this was so much better.
100%. And the culture we live in needs that, right? We need relatability. And so I always think of the dynamic between an Amish person who's living in their community, among the community, with very specific set of rules, and what do they do when they're finally able to leave? They go out and let it all out, right? And so that's one extreme again. And I felt like some of that because I had a very strict Christian household I lived in. And so part of me is like, I want to do my own thing. And I agree with you. Like, going down the path of self helps you understand what you're saved from.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
And I think so many people that shows up differently, but I think
and I think that's a key element there too. Is, like, not everybody's in just a box. Like, here are the rules. Here are the kind of the outlines of what Jesus calls us to be. Here's the outliers of the gospel, right? But, like, for me, example, like, this is just coming to mind, but it's like, there's plenty of people that you should not have a beer. You should not go to a guy and have a beer because you've had prior experiences with alcoholism, right? But, like, me, like, for a reason, the Lord hasn't made that, like, it was at a certain point in my college, but now it's like I can show up and have a beer with a buddy, whether he's a Christian or not, and it's okay. It's not going to lead me to porn. It's not going to lead me to having an affair. It's not going to lead me to anything. Somebody else? No, like, you shouldn't, right? You shouldn't do that. So, like, you can't put everybody in this simple box of, like, hey, Josh, you have to do that. It's figuring out what Josh's struggles are. What is the sins? It's anger with Josh. For me, maybe it's the pride. Maybe it's it's the judgment. Maybe it's the like the contentment that I'm struggling with right now.
Or you mentioned earlier on an identity. Being the person that I truly am, as opposed to how I want to be perceived.
So everybody's different in their struggles and their sins, and it's figuring out, okay, what do you struggle with? What are your sins? Now let's stay away from those and redirect your energy into somewhere else.
For sure. And that identity piece, I think, is so important, because we tell ourselves these stories of who we want to be, who we think we are, and that's great. Positive self-talk is key. But when we know what Scripture says, that we're fearfully and wonderfully made, that we're made in His image, man and woman alike, we're made in His image to create, and so when I think about all of that, it's like, okay, there's a pretty strong baseline here that who I am and how I've been made is beautiful. Why is all this other stuff? And it's the appeal of flesh. And we go back to the very, very beginning times, Adam and Eve, and it's like, did God really say to not eat that fruit from the tree? And that's all that is that little voice, that little flesh voice that says, maybe I should look again. And like even from my own sanctification process or journey, it was like I've gone from, I think every man, it's almost impossible to not have your eyes get caught one time, right? On a woman's situation. But I thought I was okay if I didn't go back 3 times. And I've got to the point now where I go, okay, I've gone once, I'm not going to go back for the second. And it's like, to your point, the awareness, right? The awareness is like, dude, everything in me, I'm not even doing it. My eyes are just moving. Yeah. Right?
Or like, I'm training for my Ironman right now, or half Ironman, and I'll be I was watching this show, down my basement while I was biking, and like all of a sudden there's this like pretty intimate, not really sex scene, but kind of like that, and I'm like, oh yep, we're just gonna fast forward through that, because that just automatically leads my mind down a comparison game, now I'm motivated to act out some way, like we're just gonna get rid of that and fast forward. And I've done that now, like way more. Like
Same.
I'm
even
like,
music. How about music?
Oh yeah, yep.
I'm like, wait, what did they say?
Correct.
I woke up one morning singing a song. I love like metalcore. I don't know if you're into anything heavy.
I like rock, like old school rock.
So this would be like the new stuff with some screaming and then some vocals, and really great band. But I woke up singing these vocals in the morning, and I was going, wait, what just came out of my mouth?
Yeah.
And as opposed to what I really love, and I listen to a lot of Elevation Worship, Brandon Lake, Hillsong, and like wake up singing a lot of Brandon Lake, praise, give him praise. Like I just wake up feeling this joy, and then this one song was like, the devil is real and he's caught in my grip, or something like that. I'm like, what? Like, so, but to your point, it's like returning to dog's vomit, right? The Scripture compares it to that. When we have this sin that we've overcome, why would we want to go back to it? And so natural to do, and that's the flesh. But I think it comes down to this one word, discipline. And so
Hebrews talked about no discipline is pleasant at the time, right? But it produces harvest and righteousness over time.
It's kind of like work.
It's exactly like, just like going to the gym. Like, you're not going to go to the gym. Going to the gym isn't fun in the sense of like your muscles hurting and sore isn't fun.
Yeah,
all right?
Let's be honest.
It's not fun.
And it's only work when it actually pushes the limit a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's when we know the work's working. Yeah. The discipline you said there is cool. Where's that at? Hebrews?
That's Hebrews 12:10, I think. No discipline seems pleasant at the time.
Awesome.
But like, that's just, it's true in all facets of life, of like that discipline of, changing that song or going through that. Like when I was going through my porn addiction, kind of, I had to literally go through all my songs that I worked out to. Like, okay, yep, that song's gone. Because again, I would literally be working out, not really thinking about, but like, these are the songs that I just enjoy working out to.
And you find yourself singing the words, you don't even know what they are.
You're like, I leave working out and feeling like tempted. Like, why? Oh, because I just listened to 4 or 5 or 6 or 10 songs that all mention sex. And you're like, oh, okay. That's why.
I mean, you go look at the top charts, CCLI and the Christian hits, and then you go look at, the pop charts that exist. And then I did this exercise recently, and I pulled down like 5 songs of each, and then I got the lyrics online, and rather than reading them, and I could tell what they were, I pulled them in, throw them in the chat GPT, and like, give me a summary. Let's compare and contrast these. And it's like, how is this benefit anyone? Like, I get it, like expressing yourself as music, but it's not uplifting. And again, this isn't judgment. This is like my personal preference and choice, right? Because of how he's changed me
Yep.
to be wanting to grow and wanting to be more like him. So the old is gone, the new has come. So that's so cool. And then particularly around discipline, what have you had to do to make a point in your discipline to become more disciplined? What is your routines and habits?
It's a great question. I have thoughts about, like, discipline is discipline. Like, you can't go, but routines and habits. I think of, I'm not the guy who wakes up at the same time every single day. Like, I usually wake up between 5:30 and 7.
Okay.
Right? But I'm not 5:30 every single
Okay.
day. I don't get up, have my cup of coffee, my workout, my Bible. Like, because why I kind of do that is, one, because I enjoy not having like a complete, like, I'm waking up at 5:30 every single day. But also I think of like the Mike Tyson quote of, like, everyone has a plan until you get punched in the throat, punched in the face. You kind of have to have flexibility. My mom and I always talk about that a lot. Like, if you, like, life isn't just this, like, boom, 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 boom. Like, things are going to hit the fan. Your kid's going to get sick. Your dog, like, things go out of whack, and you have to be flexible. So the discipline that I have is the working out, whether it's, okay, I got up a little late because I needed some extra sleep, so I figured out how to do it in the afternoon, right? It's I'm going to pray in the afternoon. I'm going to read my Bible this morning and then pray later. Like, I have the disciplines of working out, of eating well, cooking, of prayer time, journal, and Bible, right?
That's awesome.
Those are the journal, and it's not every single day. Right now, like, over the past couple months, I've probably sacrificed a little bit of Bible time because I've been working out so much for my Ironman. But then it's gonna, once I free up some more time, I'll be able to get back to my Bible. So I've been journaling and praying more, right? So I'm not a guy like, these are my disciplines,
right,
but it's not like I have this perfect morning routine. And I did have that in college. Like, I did the same exact morning routine, and it was good for a while. But life is just too unpredictable sometimes
100%.
to be like, oh, I'm just doing this, and this.
Well, I think you said to keep,
Especially as an entrepreneur too. I think as a business owner, sometimes I'm up late. Sometimes I'm up later than I wanted to be because I gotta
Taking care of business.
I gotta get this stuff done.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna get up at 5 a.m. to do this workout. I'll get up at 6 or 6:30 and skip the workout or skip this and do that. I don't know.
No, and I think the discipline piece and then habits and routines, you're right. There's a distinction, and discipline is being able to say no when enough's enough, and being willing to start or do something when you don't want to. Right?
Yes. And that's the biggest key too, is not letting your mind be like, oh, I missed it, I can't do it now.
Right.
It's like, no, I can still do that. I just have to choose to do it right now.
What else was the trade-off, right?
Yep.
And then hold yourself accountable. And it's interesting. I actually, January 2023, I hired an accountability coach. Not because I need to be held accountable to anything specific, other than my personality is lots of ideas. What are you working on? And that can change. I've noticed, just period, who I am. A path is clear, and when you get off just a little bit off the path, you can stumble down a rabbit trail, right? And then you can stay down the rabbit trail and then think, you know what, I'm going to take out the machete, I'm going to turn this rabbit trail into a full-on blown, this is the path now. And so that has been really helpful for me to once a week, 20 minutes, that's it. Once a week, 20 minutes, and it's like, what are the top 3 things I'm going to do this week? I'm like, wow, that's pretty high level. And so
You meet with that person once a week, that coach?
on the phone, that's it.
Nice,
I've never met her, never seen her, except for maybe the LinkedIn. I don't even know if I have, but it's been incredible because their model is simply, we show up, we understand what's going on. 20 minutes is the perfect match of, I know enough, but I don't know everything, but enough to say what worked, what didn't, what's next.
Yep.
And so
accountability, I've been in a lot of accountability groups and tried to make accountability. And accountability can be difficult. This year, I think I'm in the best accountability spot possible. I have 2 other guys that I'm doing it with on my real estate team, and it's very specific. So we have a sheet, and it's got to be very specific. So it's like,
absolutely,
I'm reading,
a smart goal, right?
reading 1 book. I'm doing
In what period of time?
in the month. We're doing monthly goals. We're doing monthly goals because weekly goals for us, we tried weekly goals, but weekly goals, life gets in the way. You got kids, whatever, and all of a sudden you're off. So
Do you check in between the months?
So we check in periodically during the month, but it's monthly goals, right? And you can, if you want to read a book at the last day, you can do it, right? And it doesn't have to be work related. It can be work, personal, whatever. So it's like, for me, it's like all of us we're in a cold call, a prospect, this many hours a month, right?
Yep.
That's very, you either did or you didn't.
That's a tough one.
We're going to work out X amount of times. For me, I don't set that goal right now because I'm working out a lot, but they are because they want to work out more. So they're doing like 10 workouts a month. That's tracks, right? Are you going to read one book? Are you going to do 10, 15 quiet times with the Lord? So it's very simple. And then what's nice is what we're doing is at the end of the month, we'll do a review, like, hey, how'd you do? What are you going to change? You're going to add something, you're going to delete something, you're going to bump this up. Maybe you got a vacation this month, so now you're going to actually go down a little bit, which is fine too because you have that.
Yep.
And then we're doing $50 a month.
Wow.
If you don't do it, $50 cash in an envelope. But then what's also making it more interesting is that if I fail, I have to pay the $50, but both the other guys also have to pay $15 cash.
If you fail.
If I fail.
So now they're like, hey, get up, dude.
Exactly.
I don't want
to pay $15.
Boy,
so
what would happen if it was
accountable.
50-50-50?
Yeah, I don't.
All for one for all?
Yeah.
Wow, that must have to answer.
But I just feel like accountability has to be it has to be something very strong like that because it's so easy to be like. For a lot of people, it's easy to be like to make that call like to your accountability coach and be like, oh, I didn't do it. Sorry.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
It is. I've done that.
Well, here's the reality what I learned by hiring someone with that title, an accountability coach. Here's what I've learned. That accountability, the way when you meet up with these guys and hold yourself accountable, and then there's a, something that as a result, a consequence or a positive if you do it, those are great things. But what I've learned was, yes, and they're going to help you, encourage you, but what we're trying to create ultimately is our own ability to deliver on what we say.
Correct.
Right? It really doesn't matter about these guys, and so they're just tools, right? They're just they could be they're just guys that are there in the same boat you are.
Correct.
But what I've learned through this process is, my goodness, it's me and my ability to be disciplined in being held accountable, right? So being willing to know what it is that I'm going to stay focused on, and knowing that if I don't, that I'm not doing what I said, and now I'm not honoring I think God in this way, because it's like, yeah, I fall short, absolutely, but the reality is I want to set the goal so then I can continue to show up and not have to worry about, and I think it's so common because I didn't do X because X was never written down and X was only in my head.
In your head, yeah.
And it's like, oh, well, at least let's write it down, and then what's the consequence if you don't? Well, you're not building muscle memory if you're not requiring yourself to check it off. So,
and it makes you focus on the most important tasks versus getting off in, like, just in real estate or business. Like, you can do so many different things, but like, what are the core things that you should be doing to
100%.
push yourself forward?
Key activities.
It's these, right? So that keeps me accountable, and it makes me, I think for me, like, I have a tendency a little bit sometimes to overcommit myself, and I've gotten better. It's like, oh, I'm going to do that. I'm going to overcommit. And now with this accountability thing too, it's really made me be able to test my limits truly. Like, I'm going to be able to do this, right? And I look at my whole month, like I have this maybe vacation or something coming up, so I'm going to set this, right? And it's a little bit of a stretch goal. It's going to push me,
right.
But it's also attainable. And I think some people do set very high goals, which is great. But if you keep setting high goals that you never hit, you never get that, like, a little bit of what's the word? Not adrenaline. Dopamine hit of like, hey, I did what I said I was going to do.
Yep.
So that's what's been nice is, like you said, it's very specific, and it just keeps me focused on the key activities.
So speaking of specific, and I think it's important sometimes to get the perspective of someone who. So I have this 15-year marriage, right? And fortunately, I would say that I have, my wife and I both have our things, and that's great. In 15 years, you learn to work through them and understand your systems. But on the front end of things, we didn't know what we had until we ran into them. And so what could you share on the front end of being married that you went into your marriage intentional to, based on the stuff you don't want to have happen, right? From those around you, the horror stories of divorce and separation and whatnot. Was there anything specific that you and your wife set out in terms of intentionality around how to make this marriage great? Rules of engagement, besides your vows, right?
Yeah. That's great. I think the first thing is, as a guy, America has skewed marriage a lot of, like, what it looks like. And I think, like, the last Bible study that I did, there was a whole section on marriage, and this was I did it before I got engaged, and I thought it's the Jesus way of marriage, of like the dying to yourself. Like, you know, everyone always likes to point to Ephesians 5:25, husbands love your wives, Jesus Christ love the church, and submit yourself or give yourself up for her. It's like right before that, it's always like, oh, look, wives have to submit. Yep, the wives have to submit, but the guys are actually called to a higher level.
Yeah.
If you actually know scripture, like we're called to actually give their whole life up for their woman, right, or for their bride. So going through that process made me understand like what a true like actual marriage looks like, from like what Jesus wants the marriage to look like. So then, you know, Ann and I had a lot of conversations about that. We also read we were going to read more books, but we did read one book that was The Mingling of Souls, which was good. Christian book about, I think it was off the book of Solomon. And we read that book, discussed it. We had all of the conversations that you should have about how many kids do you want, that kind of stuff. But I also think the thing that I had to get vulnerable of, like, you know, I was the most scared just because I came from a separated family, and I was like, and I don't want this.
And
so
her
like,
parents?
And her parents are still together, right? So I don't want this, and that's why it maybe took me longer to get to the point of like I'm ready to get engaged because of that. Not saying that she was like ready to get engaged after a couple months.
No, but you're just more gun shy.
But I'm more for sure, and I had to be vulnerable about that. And we had, you know, conversations about like, hey, like the D word is not a thing that we even. That's not even in our vocabulary.
Yeah, I love that.
And then, you know, how do we want to have confrontation? When we do have confrontation, do we do it in front of the kids? Do we not? How do we do the balance of it, right? And like, I think that's going to evolve over time. Like right now, it's like we want to have as least confrontation as possible in front of our kids, but I think it's okay to have maybe a little bit of healthy confrontation, just so they can see and understand how people actually do confrontation. A loving confrontation too, right? So those are the types of conversations that we had, and I think it's going to evolve. I mean, premarital counseling was great too, of just going through and dissecting all of that stuff. Right. But I think it was just really about us being both intentional of like, we're not here just to date.
Yeah.
And I think that was what we were lined on. I'm not here to date you, Anna. Anna's not here to date just Jade.
Just taking a new journey, a new step, and this is what this means.
Does this actually lead to us getting engaged and married?
Yeah. Good for you, man. I think it's very powerful, and it's always powerful to go back to a wedding after you've been married, always, because it's just seeing two people. My sister got married. She's 10 years younger than me, just a couple months ago, and it was really neat. You know, she was the only girl, and I picked up a new brother.
Nice.
You know, but the reality is, when there's not a root in Christ, and that marriage is just tough, and it's already tough.
Yep.
But unless you can die to self, that love word is a very, very big word, and to be all in and being willing and able to whatever it takes to put yourself down for your spouse to wear that responsibility, that's the ultimate, man, right? And it is hard, and so the only way to do it is with Jesus, and that's the reality. Like for me, I've just learned so much with kids, having 5, and even with my wife now. We all have our days, but if we respond in a combative way, we are not de-escalating anything. But if we respond in love, despite how we feel inside, and we take a deep breath, and we can learn to process and separate emotion from behavior, we can and choose to respond in love. Like, wow, that's a principle that I am still learning at 15 years later. Yeah. And so,
and I always think about what I've learned the most of the 6 months of marriage, but we've been now together for 2.5 years basically, and is when there is a conflict, when there is something that's wrong or off, or something that I did, something that she did, well, that doesn't matter. Looking at myself first and being like, what could have I done better? Yeah. And come into the conversation of like, here's what I did wrong. Here's what I could have done better. Yeah. Opens up way more conversation versus like, you did this, you 100%. Did that, and you know, blah blah blah. Versus like, hey,
you're wrong.
This was bad, but here's what I did wrong. Here's my
part of it. Yep.
Here's my part of it. 100%. And then that usually leads to, yeah, you're right. Okay, and here's my fault, right?
It's so good.
Versus just pointing the finger. You got to point your finger at your.
Well, that's the selfishness, right? It's very common to pull and point out the little tiny thing that they did when you just have the mountain plank of speck in your own. And the faster a guy can get on his knees and learn that the only way is through love, wow, it's way easier said than done. And so that's a great encouragement, because I think even it doesn't matter how old you are, it should get easier. But if you don't have that baseline mindset that the D word is not an option, and that we're committed as one, and that the man and the husband needs to show up and love them the way Christ loved the church, which is be willing to give his life for her, you can't fail. But the moment Josh creeps in,
the moment the flesh comes in.
The flesh, baby. So it's so good.
And it comes in when you least expect it.
That's the problem. You're like, oh man, my head's on a swivel. I'm looking for all the things that could go wrong.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden, guard down, poof, rah, and it still happens. Not as often, which is awesome.
Yep.
But that's not a me here thing. This is a observation about where I was and where I've gotten to. But then when I'm talking to someone else, it's about, okay, I get it. How can I encourage you? And it's not from a place of, this is what the Bible says, and this, and this. Although we are and should call a brother out,
absolutely,
when necessary, and it's scriptural, right? But so it's that fine line where Christians just get that rap of, too good, point the finger.
Yes.
So no,
it's I'm just a tool. Like, hey, and that's people always. I think I read or saw a video one time of like, it was a guy, I think, arguing with some college students or something on a campus.
Yeah, I see that one.
Yeah, he's great. I think George Kittle, I think his name is, or something.
That's right. I think so. A lot of them are LGBTQ or whatever, and then also other gender things
and other religions, or whatever. But it was kind of funny because I think one time it was him. I think he said like, "Hey, like, I'm not the one to get mad at here. Like, like, I'm just a tool, right? I'm just, if I'm calling you out on your sin, it's not me calling you out on your sin. It's Jesus, and I'm just a tool to kind of say, hey, like, Jesus doesn't want you to do this, and here's why. I'm not the one judging you. Jesus is the one just kind of judging you, saying, hey, you need to do this.
Right.
He's lovingly judging you.
Right.
He wants you to get away from that. He's not, and if you come to him, he's going to forgive you.
Right.
I'm not the one. I'm just the tool that says, hey, here's the gospel, here's what it says.
I think it's harder though when there's a lack of relational equity. In his circumstance, he does a good job because it's like you said, the way he does it and words it and the way you mentioned it now. But then that would be harder if you're just doing that randomly, and pointing people out. Because I think it's, in his situation, it's pushed on him. They enter the question with this, hey, you think this about me, right? And then he's responding to that, as opposed to, like, he's not walking around pointing anyone out. But that's the part where we can get into trouble, and there's a time and a place. But at the end of the day, like, being vulnerable first is strength. You know?
And just showing up with that relationship aspect is big too. To start with that relationship, and then be able to share Jesus is, I think, is the best way versus going around and slapping people.
No doubt. The thumper.
Yeah.
So as we wrap here, what's your goal this year in 2024? How many dollars and how many units are you selling this year?
I'd like to get above 30. I'm at I think I'm at 12 closed and like six or seven pending closing. One's an apartment building. We'll see if that closes. So I'd love to get that one closed and sell another 13 to 15 homes and get above 30 and save for a house next year.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah.
Is your average home price going up in terms of clientele?
Yeah, it seems like it. My average home price. I mean, prices have gone up too, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I would
what do you say it is now?
400.
Is that right?
Probably 450.
And last year?
350, 380.
Yeah. And how much of that is client versus market?
I think more of it is honestly market, to be honest with you, because I think the prices have went up, and first-time home buyers or people buying their second home, they're just like, oh, I have to buy this price of home now to get what I want.
Yep, 100%. Yeah, that's true.
Because I think I mentioned before, a lot of my clients haven't done the upsizing yet when they bought their first home, now buying the second one, just because a lot of my clients in 2020 and 2021 were locked in such good interest rates.
And it's hard. Who wants to walk away from that, free money practically? Well, this has been a joy, man, and getting a chance just to jump in, pick your brain.
Yeah.
And the whys the wisdom that comes from a 28-year-old Jade Rowe is so good to get a crash course backing up to some of the roots where we have in common of faith, man. So it was an honor to have you on the show. Appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in.
Thank you, Josh.
You got it, man. Thanks for tuning in for another episode of Successfully Unsuccessful. We will see you next time.